50 men to fight the strongest army in the world. This is how we do it. Take the land back castle by castle. We could fight for God, for country, for family. I do not care, so long as you fight!
Edinburgh, capital of Scotland. Home to some of the most amazing medieval and Gothic architecture in the world, and chock full of landmarks, from castles to churches to statues to museums and libraries. It's like a trip back to another era. Fitting, since I'm here to talk to the cast and crew behind Outlaw King, Netflix's big-budget feature about Robert the Bruce, the King of Scots. King Robert is celebrated and hailed a hero here, so I took the opportunity to ask those involved with the film what it was like to bring his story to life, and how much of the story is true, and how much is legend. Let's find out. Hey guys, Paul Schreier with JoBlo.com. I am here in Edinburgh, Scotland at Borthwick Castle. And we're getting ready to interview Chris Pine, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, director David Mackenzie, and a couple other surprises. Also going to mess around with some birds, and I'm going to shoot some bows and arrows. I'm also going to have a drink here of this Outlaw King brew. So we're going to have some fun. We're going to have some conversation, and that's going to be about it. So why don't you come join me? It's good. It's good.
Okay, so if you want to step up here, okay, and just stand yourself on there, point your toes towards my toes, that's it. So you're going to keep toes, feet, hips, shoulders, all in line like that. Only thing that goes to the target is your head.
All right.
Okay, easy peasy. Right, grab hold of that there, just in your left hand. That's it, other than that, that's perfect. Go straight along, line it up, let it go when you're ready. There we go. Have to do
best.
Line that up and let it go. Good set there. Would you like to know your score?
Yeah.
53 out of a possible 60.
How is that? Is that good?
That's good. Yeah, 53 out of 60, can't be bad.
All right. Ready for battle. Good boy. Sweet. Send a raven, as they say. I don't know who says that. All right, here's the interviews. Enjoy.
I serve Robert Bruce. Join us to free our land.
Is it true? You're the King of Scots.
Go tell all your friends we're going to win our country back.
So Chris, I'm curious, what is it that Dave Mackenzie said to you that made you want to do this role?
He said I have a medieval action film, and that pretty much did it for me.
It's an easy sell. What is it like taking on a significant historical type figure like this, in terms of living up to expectation historically versus taking on like a fictional character? What is that like in your preparation for something like that?
Well, the good thing is he's 670 some odd years old or gone. So no one knew him, and I can only go off, if we're just talking historical facts, what the facts say in terms of where he was. He didn't write anything down much. There's no memoir or autobiography. The one major poem written about him was kind of concurrent or just after his lifetime was clear hagiography. Many stories about him are apocryphal, so the historical record says certain things, and you can create kind of a narrative that way. You can talk to historians You can go to the battlefields, and then you have to be given a script that tries to make sense of some of that. So the difficulty here was giving him a sense, all of the complexity that I saw in him as a man. I didn't know whether he was a brilliant strategist and Machiavellian politician who kissed the ring in the beginning in order to then find the chance to strike. Did he kill one of his main rivals in a church knowing full well what he was doing, or did he not? These are all things that really made him interesting to me, and I didn't want to give anything away and make a choice about any of it because I wanted audience members to watch him and make up their own minds about who they thought this man was. So I felt actually an incredible amount of freedom, and the onus was I can't live up to that because everybody will have their own expectations about a man that they obviously hold dear that I'll probably never live up to.
Which gives you a little more freedom, I guess, in that sense too. Yeah.
In a way, yeah.
So Aaron, there is a name spoken in this film that won't be forgotten once you utter it, or scream it, or yell it. Yeah. What is it like tapping into that emotional connection in that film? Because when you yell Douglas, you feel it, like in the screen. So what is it? What do you have to do to get into that emotional set?
Well, I think this character was, and you see very early on, he's been shunned of his family name, not only his right to his own land and castle, and but his family name has been damned, and then what are you left? What are you with no land and name? And your identity is all gone, and I think he's lost, and he finds himself with this band of outlaws, and that's his tribe, and they're there to unify a country, a nation which is divided. So you read a lot of poetry of that time, and it's just as patriotic as it is now, and I think it just sort of pumps through your veins, and you want to express that kind of passion and rage and vengeance and love, and it's a sort of a combination of everything. So it was liberating to play.
So you guys have both done big superhero films. You have Wonder Woman, you have Avengers for you. What is it like working on something like this as compared to that? I mean, you're going on something that's kind of bigger with a big fan base, and then you take a step back here. You're not working on so much on a green screen, and you're actually in the mud. You're on the sets. What does that do for you guys? Like once you're as actors putting in this, does that immerse you more in this environment?
I think that that's absolutely what David Mackenzie's concept and idea of directing is sort of putting us into this environment, this authentic, raw environment, and finding locations that are off the map and grid and beautiful landscapes, and saying, right, off you go. I've got 4 cameras. You ain't gonna know where they are, but they're gonna find something of you, and it's documentary filmmaking, and make it as real as possible. The budget, it might be the same as one of those kind of movies, but you've got a different sort of filmmaker at the helm and full creativity, so it felt like an intimate independent in a way.
So my last question for you guys. This is a Netflix film. So what is it like working on a Netflix movie as compared to, say, Warner Brothers or Paramount or anybody else? What's the difference in that? For me, it was pretty much unparalleled creative freedom. They respected and liked David Mackenzie as a filmmaker, knew the film he wanted to make, and essentially stepped back. Of course, they gave some guiding notes in terms of every studio and money personal for certain financial reasons or whatnot, but for the most part, they were very, very hands-off.
Robert the Bruce is an outlaw. Any man or woman who would give shelter to him or his ranks is to be executed without trial.
The people are desperate for justice.
So David, why Robert the Bruce?
Robert the Bruce is a heroic figure, an interesting, historical figure that we've known in this country for all our lives, as it were, and somebody who's never properly had a film made of him, and there's a lot of legend, a lot of myth, and I wanted to make a movie that unpicked some of that and that delved into the history and tried to represent medieval life and the issues and problems he was facing, and the relationships he had with people, including a fantastic real life romance that he'd had with his arranged marriage wife Elizabeth, played by the great Florence Pugh. Yeah, it's a rich subject to delve into as a filmmaker. It's a completely different thing for me to have done before, and it was fantastic to have the chance to work with Chris, who I worked with on Hell or High Water 2, and doing the type of filmmaking that we did then, but on a much, much larger scale.
So the film is, I mean, it's kind of a sequel to Braveheart in a roundabout sort of way. So I'm curious, like, how much that film informed you in terms of the decisions that you made for Outlaw King versus what came before in Braveheart. Did that influence you at all in any way?
It's a funny one. When I was making the film, I really didn't think about that film at all, and I was sort of trying to, almost hoping that I could get away with not even having to kind of address the issue. And it's been a while since I've seen that movie, but it seems like in conversation everyone is bringing it up, so I have to accept that it is an elephant in the room. It's a very different film in tone. It's a very different film in the style of filmmaking. And it, 20 years has passed, and cinema itself has kind of changed a bit. So the two will exist. There's a similar time period, and Robert has a small appearance in that film, and William Wallace has a very small appearance in our film, and so there's a crossover. And historically, obviously, it's the same thing, but it's a film in its own right, and it's not meant to be a sequel.
John, between us, we could raise 20,000 men. We could have a fighting chance.
It'll never work. The people are tired of war and suffering.
Wallace was tortured and slaughtered. The people aren't tired. They are desperate for justice.
Wallace got what he deserved. He wasn't a man, he was an idea. A destructive and dangerous idea.
And this film takes place in a kind of a more definitive period in Robert the Bruce's life, rather than covering the huge expanse of his campaign. Can you talk about the choice to focus on this one particular area of his story?
What his struggles took place over a long period of time, and they're complex. He sort of works fighting for both sides at some point, and he's got divided loyalties. He ends up swearing an oath and surrendering completely to King Edward, and then breaks those oaths, and so it's a complex kind of beginning. And it goes on for a really long time, and too long to really be told in a film. And so in the process of working through the script, I sort of found a period that between 1305 and 1307 that where incredibly seismic things happen to Robert, and it's a real roller coaster in terms of real historical events. And it just felt that that's where all the heart of his story was, and so we ended up concentrating on that. And the result is it's not not a big episodic kind of historical thing. It's actually got a real sort of tangible sort of dramatic flow to it, which I think is what good filmmaking should be doing, and it took a long time to get there, but I feel like finding that smaller period and focusing on that was a challenge that we took, and hopefully succeeded in doing.
So you've worked on big studio films, you've done independent style films. This is your first film with Netflix as a studio. What is that like, working with them versus the others that you've done before?
I've never really worked on a big studio film. This is definitely the biggest film I've done, and it's an enormous opportunity to be able to be given this level of budget, but at the same time this level of creative freedom, which Netflix gave us. And they've been great partners. I've really enjoyed the experience, and I sort of feel like their trust in myself as a filmmaker and other filmmakers, and to do the things that they want to do is a really great thing in contemporary filmmaking, and I'm really happy for, not just for myself, but for other filmmakers who are doing it.
Where's Robert? Where's your husband? Where's your brother?
No!
Any man or woman who would give shelter to him or his ranks is to be executed without trial.
It's hard to ignore Braveheart when looking at this film. You're playing a character that was made pretty famous in that film, but you have a very different take than what that was. So I'm curious what the pressure was like for you in having to kind of carry that burden, or to create something new out of what everybody has kind of expected before?
Yeah, expectation is the word, and you do in the back of your mind feel that pressure whenever a real life person has been portrayed previously. I think that's in some senses unavoidable. As an actor, yes, that can lead to all manner of insecurities, and there's a whole plethora of issues, you know, both politically on screen and off screen, in portraying a real life person. You know, thankfully this guy died quite a long time ago. So I can say what I want about him essentially, and you know, without passing judgment, my portrayal of him is to flesh him out in terms of how to make that relatable for a modern day audience. Now, I mean, yes, the previous portrayals, you know, I mean, we have the play Edward II, you know, and that really draws upon certain things that were written by official biographers of the crown at the time, and the official biographers would have been more in cahoots with Edward II's father's entourage. Now, they had a political reason for wanting to get him off the throne as quickly as possible, whether that was his sexual proclivities, whether that was the fact that he wasn't a great military tactician, who knows. But yeah, so you feel those pressures, but I decided to, and I spoke with David extensively about this, and sort of said, look, I don't want to go down that path. I don't think we should go down that path. I want to really, you know, bring out the complexities, you know, of who this person was as a politician, as a king, you know, and to fill his father's footsteps as a warmongering kind of, you know, guy who's been on crusades, for goodness sake. I mean, we only need to, I'm glad I said for goodness sake there, you know, to mention those and see what sort of damage was done worldwide, and how brutal and ruthless these people truly were. And I think it was important to bring that out in my portrayal of this role.
So Tony, you have been in other sword epics, and you've been in Gladiator, 13th Warrior, one of my personal favorites. I absolutely love that movie. I'm curious for you, what makes it different being in something like this, that's like a true historical kind of epic thing? What makes that different for you as an actor?
Well, I mean, when I first spoke to David about, you know, the possibility of playing Angus Og MacDonald, you know, I was thrilled just to be even considered for it, and then obviously we talked about it. I did a lot of research on it even before I spoke to him on the phone, and you know, thankfully I got the role. But yeah, it's very much Angus Og MacDonald is someone you cannot, you know, separate, equate from Robert the Bruce, because he was one of his closest kinsmen. But as we've talked about in the last couple of days, there's not a huge amount of documentation on these princes, princesses, royals, lords, ladies' lives, you know, or a lot of it, you know, has been tainted or changed or written by the powers that be in a propagandist manner. But one thing that I was very kind of honoured to play this man who was a total devotee to Robert the Bruce and Robert the Bruce's cause, because the fact that he gave up all his lands, gave up all his wealth, because he felt the need, the desire within himself, the sort of fire burning inside to not let Edward I basically obliterate Scotland and make Scotland England in many ways. He stood up for it in that sense, and he had these generals, the Black Douglas, played by Aaron, and obviously Angus Og MacDonald. So, no, to bring this character to life, you know, one is Billy. A lot of actors have mentioned in these interviews, you can only do so much research, and then you have to bring, you know, you have to bring Billy to the Prince of Wales. You have to bring Tony to Angus Og MacDonald and make him, you know, there's a bit of levity that, you know, Angus brings as well, but a lot of that comes from sort of compassion for the cause and for what Bruce is trying to do, because what he is trying to do is, one might not call it a suicide mission, but it's definitely audacious.
you know. And what we're going to do? Oh, we're going to fight the greatest fighting force that at that time has ever been put together, ever created. To be part of this film and to play someone like Angus is, you know, is a real thrill for me. And then to see the film and see it all come to life and see the way that you know, because the cut was different from Canada. I think it's more streamlined and it's tighter. It's epic and emotional and very, very, I think it draws you in. And it's also got so many different levels of intimacy about it and relevant social, cultural moments in it that I think people can relate to today, although it was 700 years ago.
You could fight for God, for country, for family. I do not care, so long as you fight!